For my second key learning reflection, I'm going to focus on analyzing the use of the tool of the interrelationship digraph, also known as the interrelationship diagram, in zooming in on our system in order to prioritize our high leverage drivers and where we are going to target our change ideas within the system. So I thought that this would be a really cool and sensical follow up from my first key learning reflection that spoke about the importance of seeing the system and the principle number 3, and how critical it is to zoom out and understand the different perspectives and take into account how all of the parts of an organization work together to accomplish certain things, how they are connected, and how a decision in one part can easily impact another. So now that we've been focusing on zooming out and understanding how the system can work as a catalyst impacting the rest, now where I struggled with was, okay, now how do I focus my change ideas on a level that I have control over to initiate positive change within this system? So since it does work as a domino effect, how do I narrow down where to start and where to direct these resources and these change ideas for that desired outcome that I am hoping to, and use how the system works now that I understand it to my advantage, to initiate the largest scale changes possible, but in the right place. So when you are personally invested in a process or an organization, it's easy to feel like every driver is important. Now that we recognize this, now that we conducted empathy interviews, we feel for all of these drivers, we see them, and how do we prioritize them? And that is where I was lost, because now I saw the system, but I needed to start on the ground in one place. So the interrelationship diagram, after it was introduced by Professor Laird, was the answer to my prayers in that sense, because it forces you to prioritize one driver over another by acknowledging that certain ones may have more or less of an influence when compared to the other factors that you are comparing and contrasting them to. So using the arrow symbol to signify influence heading in or out was very helpful in directing, in myself envisioning the direction of these changes. Okay, if we start in one of these drivers, where is that going to go, and what part of the system is that going to impact, and where could it be most influential? So my driver diagram ended up looking like this, and I was able to identify through this the two most impactful variables within my system were language barriers and teacher training and experience. And in doing so, I realized that most of my other factors led back to those two drivers that were resulting in the outcomes of my English language learner students underperforming their peers in the content classrooms. And while cultural barriers, the ESL program, and available resources are, of course, important and came up in a lot of qualitative data, that we could basically trace the struggles within the language barriers and the lack of teacher training and experience as the largest contributing factors to the negative impacts of those outcomes. So that was incredibly helpful for me to know. And it was a great representation visually for me to organize that in order to direct my focusing tools. So this was the zooming in that I needed from the overall system that I was super passionate about. It helped me illuminate those root causes, which I was struggling to prioritize because I found them all important. A helpful source that I utilized in making my diagram was from ASQ, which stands for the American Society for Quality. And that is a global networking community of quality professionals from around the globe. And they outlined several different uses of this tool that they use in ensuring quality across many different fields and measuring that quality. So it was a really trusted source with a lot of examples across a variety of fields. So they kind of outlined when it is important to use this and how we can use it to analyze complex issues where we might disagree on where the root causes are coming from or which are more important. When we are being forced to choose, it allows us to kind of dive deeper. It's also not a tool that you can necessarily start with, and I think that's an important thing that the resource taught me as well. We have to do this after we generate something as in a fishbone diagram where we first explored the whole system before we can use this to narrow down. So some social and normative factors that we would have to consider in utilizing this in our system is that acknowledging that all of these are important and acknowledging the different perspectives and how that they came to create this picture for us, but at the same time understanding that we are being forced to choose for the betterment of the organization in order to realize that positive change that we're hoping for. So making it okay to be transparent with this is not associating blame, that this is solely for us to direct our resources in a better place. And it is not saying that any one part of this system is more or less important, but rather we are acknowledging the relationships between them. And so that people do not feel left out, they do not feel like any blame is being placed, or wherever they fall within the system is more or less important or impactful. And I think that's really important to establish with everyone first. And I think it's also important to establish that this tool is for zooming in, no more for zooming out, because we already explored the whys. We already saw the system, and instead now we need to figure out where and in which direction to go in terms of fixing this problem and working together on it. And those would be the key factors that I would love to communicate with my team to make sure that we utilize this tool properly at the right time in the right place for the right reasons.